And we're live. Sayed, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate your time. And I'm looking forward to this because I know we have a lot to talk about in terms of your field of work that I think is going to be really valuable for everybody. And I have some interesting questions on it myself. Also, on the business side of things, I really want to ask you some questions that I think will be valuable to anybody, whether they're younger and just wanting to get into their field of choice, whether they're seasoned entrepreneurs and business owners with your experience. I think there's a lot to be said today. So I'll let you tell us a bit more about who you are, what you do, and then we'll go from there.
Sounds great. Thank you for the opportunity. So I'm Syed Abbas Moosavi. I am a physician practicing in Michigan and have some affiliations here in Windsor, Ontario. I have been in practice since 2010, and I specialize in interventional pain, sports medicine, and more recently, regenerative medicine or orthobiologics, as we call it now. We talk about PRP and stem cell therapies.
Got it. That's awesome. And I love the new transition to regenerative medicine and everything that you're working on nowadays. I want to ask you about all of that. But first things first, if you don't mind just highlighting how you looked at this area of medicine or your field of choice and how you decided to pursue this in the first place, I would love to hear the backstory because I don't think I'm familiar yet.
No, so I've always wanted to go into medicine. It's from the time I was in high school. Going into medicine, most of us have some type of idea of what we want to pursue in terms of specialty. So from the get-go, I was really interested in radiology, looking at imaging and so on. But when I went through the clinical aspect of my medical school, I realized that my place is more of an interactive type person. I like to talk to patients and examination, etc. And I came upon what I do now, which is physical medicine, rehabilitation, interventional pain management, sports medicine, kind of all within one specialty. And so it took me a little while to realize that radiology wasn't for me, and I think that's what a lot of physicians tend to do, is they have a goal, and then when they pursue what they do in their last final years of medical school, and they realize that maybe that's not the right position for them. So for me, it was more or less the patient interaction, and not only that. I mean, thinking about kind of the business model perspective is from a radiologist perspective versus what I do. There's a lot more. Um, uh, Variability and business model type setups for the specialty I work in rather than radiology. So it was multifaceted reason as to why I decided to pursue my specialty, and more so because of patient interaction, but also because I think there's a lot more opportunity.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's a really good reason to pivot, and it seems like it's a common thing that people in your field get to the area that they studied and wanted to specialize in, and then it may not have been all that it was made out to be, or it may not have been what they're super passionate about. But I would assume, just like the entrepreneurship space, most people won't take the extra risk to pivot or to really pursue what they want to pursue or to continue their growth, like you have with your clinics and everything you do. I don't know how accurate that is, but I feel like not everybody is like yourself and willing to pivot and willing to recreate themselves.
That's absolutely correct. I think the notion of physicians not understanding the business aspect or the entrepreneurship model of this career has been changing, I think, in the last few decades, and I think more so now than before, because our prior focus was clinical medicine and care, and I think we can still maintain that, but at the same time, um, you know have a nice foundation. I call it a good foundation from a business standpoint, because at the end of the day, I mean, if you're married, you have children, you have a future, you have to think about retirement and so on. So I think one thing that I believe is really lacking, and I hopefully will start changing sooner rather than later, is during the medical program, really isn't a lot of education on this aspect of the practice of the career of, yes, you can go out there and be a very good physician, but how can you survive from a financial point of view with the cuts in, I mean, in our case, because, in the US, we have a lot of different variabilities when it comes to insurance reimbursement. It changes every year. So, and it's going less and less and less. And so we have to think about that. Ontario, obviously, we don't have to think about that as much, but still the compensation or the reimbursements are less than they are, even comparatively speaking, than the US. So they still have to keep that in mind. But I think there's more awareness now. And I've been, happy to speak about that with a lot of my colleagues who come to us and, want to have conversations, open conversations about how do I diversify myself rather than going to clinic 9 to 5,
hmm
And so,
Yeah, and I'm going to ask you about the diversification as well and everything you do on the business side. It seems like you get into this field thinking you're only going to practice what you do best in your medicine and all of that and help people from that perspective. But then you soon realize there's a business element to all of this as well. And you actually have to be business savvy as well and know how to make decisions and how to expand and how to sustain yourself so that you could continue to scale and help more people. Now, going back to your area of expertise, so you mentioned pain management and then pivoting into regenerative medicine and PRP and stem cells and everything that you do nowadays. What have you seen that is, you could say, most impactful in terms of handling some of the issues that you see in your patients, whether it's pain related issues, whether it's PRP or stem cell related issues? I mean, which area are you most, I guess you could say, optimistic about or passionate about nowadays?
so one of the biggest things I've noticed in the last many years now is patients come to us with a plan in mind. So it's like going to a store and you understand that what you want to buy, you're going in there to buy that thing. And if you don't get it, you're going to go to another store to get it. So, so I see in the last, probably 5 to 7 years of at least my practice, that patients would come to me and ask me about different treatment options. And at that time we weren't really offering them, and so it really kind of opened my eyes to patients are educating themselves as a consumer, and they're saying, listen, I want this. For example, when I talk about regenerative medicine, we talk about it as an alternative to surgery. So someone who comes in with chronic knee pain, and they were told they need knee surgery but they want to try stem cell therapy, and so they come to us. And so I think the awareness and education of, I mean, some would call it Dr. Google or whatever the case is much higher than it was before. So to meet that demand, we had to diversify our areas of practice, and not have a kind of a straight linear path. And I think that's a big root behind, why we made many changes, because I think the patients are just much more aware. And the questions they come with, it's pretty interesting. It's, studies, and they read this stuff, and we got to keep up with it. I mean, the whole parental kind of, model of, the patient will listen to what we say is no longer present, because they come with this education. So to be able to keep up with it, we had to really kind of expand our service model and our service, options.
Yeah, so I think first of all, that's very true. I definitely agree with you because I'm one of those
Mhm.
individuals myself who has handpicked a few of the so-called, experts or researchers or scientists and tunes into their work and is constantly updating myself, and I'm constantly learning and evolving. And anytime
Mhm.
I've gone in and done any type of testing, whether it's DNA related testing, or recently I did the Dutch test as well, just to see some of my levels and all of that.
Yep.
I'm very aware of what I'm looking at as well. So when I'm speaking to whether it's a doctor or a naturopath or whoever it might be, I'm also aware of the dynamic and what's happening. So you're
Mhm.
absolutely right there. But I'm curious to know, what do you think of that from your perspective? Being the medical expert who, it didn't used to be like that, where, patients would pretty much be strictly listening to your advice and following suit. But now, patients come with their own opinions, with their own ideas, and some of it could be great because it's accurate and they're on top of their own health. Some of it may be misguided or
Mhm.
they may not have the full data. I mean, from a medical expert's perspective, how do you guys perceive this?
It can go both ways. And so, case in point, I had a patient the other day that came to me and said, I want spine stem cell treatment, which we do quite a bit of. Yet he hadn't pursued some of the more traditional treatments, but he came with that in mind. And it took me about a couple of visits with him to, number one, establish that, okay, he has other options. But after the third visit, the conversation kept revolving back to the same. I'm here and I want to get my spine treatment with regenerative medicine. So I mean, for lack of better words, I gave into it. I said, if this is what you truly want, my medical opinion and my medical advice is really geared towards what I feel is not just best for you, but maybe most appropriate for you. But if you want to come in and say, listen, I want to pay for this treatment because it's not covered under insurance, and I want it done. I understand the science behind it. I understand. I think that kind of opened my eyes, that little encounter that I had with this patient over the course of the last few weeks, that, if a patient comes in and they understand that, this is a treatment they want and there's no harm for them, meaning it's not going to adversely impact them if we do it. It's like I said, it's kind of giving that same model of when you walk into a store, you know what you want. You're going to get that. If you don't get it from that store, you're going to go somewhere else. It's the same idea with him. And so I think that from the perspective of a clinician, unless it's absolutely not appropriate for a patient, but they come in understanding and knowing what they really want, I think that it's appropriate to really hear them out. And as a business owner and as versus, interacting with the consumer, I think that's very important. And I think that ideology has really changed also over the last number of years within our specialty, because before, the attitude was, we know better, we're the ones that studied for 10, 12 years and et cetera, and trained, and who are you to come in and demand this? But it really isn't a demand. It's their body. They understand what their problem is, and they want to know that if it's appropriate, can we do this? So I think that that's changed our mentality quite a bit. So my model now is, when I see a patient, whether it's for regenerative medicine, whether it's for traditional pain treatments that we do, I have open ears. I hear them out. And as long as it makes sense and the clinical diagnosis makes sense with what they're looking for from a consumer/patient perspective, it can be done. That model can work, and then you get patient satisfaction. And even if it doesn't work, in other words, even if it doesn't have the outcome they expect, at least there was an informed decision that we provide them, and that they know that they chose to make this decision rather than us saying this is what you should do. So it in two perspectives is actually beneficial, because nothing we do is perfect, right? I mean, we don't have the hand of a miracle. What we do is we do our best based on what the options are for a patient. But if someone comes in saying, this is what I think, I read up on this is what I like, and I agree to it, and it makes sense to me clinically, at least even the patient knows that if it doesn't work, then at least, you know what, it was something that we informed and made together, rather than me saying this is what you should do. So I think it's really changed that outlook from a clinician's perspective. And then obviously it changes the whole business model, I think, from a clinic, and how you operate and how an organization operates.
Yeah, I think so too. And I'm really glad to hear your take on this. I feel like
Yeah.
you're amongst the, you could say, younger generation of, people in your field or in the medical establishment as a whole. And it seems like you're very much open-minded to this approach. It feels almost like a team approach where both sides are approaching the problem together, where the patient is bringing their thoughts, their,
Hmm.
ideas, what they feel they may want, and then you're bringing your expertise and doing the consultation in a way that you're providing all the information necessary for them to make an educated decision, and then they can make that final decision on their end if they feel that's the right decision for them to make. So I really like that approach. I think that's the right way to go, especially with regenerative medicine and everything that you're working on to do with the person's
Hmm.
health and future and all of that as well. Now, I wanted to ask you another question. This may be a bit of a stupid question, so I do apologize in advance, but I'm not
Sure.
clear on this, so I assume
Mhm.
somebody else out there isn't clear on this either. Why is it that we don't have all the same regulations and options for stem cells and PRP treatments and things of that nature here? Because I know of a lot of people, and even people in my own network, that go to South America or other places to get stem cell treatments and
Mhm.
whatnot. So, what is the difference? What's going on in US or Canada? Why is that not available here?
Yeah. So there is regenerative treatments available in Ontario specifically. The other provinces, I don't know the specific regulations, but they limit it to like PRP or platelet rich plasma. which is our vein drawn. We take it out of the vein and we process the sample and we inject it back into wherever we need to. There's definitely a lot of pushback when it comes to stem cell therapy, where we extract it from the bone marrow. So a lot of patients, I actually just 2 weeks ago I consulted someone from Toronto. Next week I have another patient from Toronto and we do these virtual consults like this, kind of similar to how you and I are talking. And
Right.
we do an assessment because they understand what the benefits are. There's enough published studies to support it. But there's a lot of regulation here because you're talking about utilization of your biologics, your blood, your bone marrow. And if you come to our lab in our main office out in Michigan, Shelby Township, we have a lab set up where we do everything under sterile techniques. So we actually process the sample with the regulations and we have to get it certified. And so I think that's the difference between the US and Canada is, yes, FDA approves the treatment, but they don't advocate for it because it is considered experimental under many measures. But granted, there's probably hundreds, if not thousands, of published articles of the benefit of regenerative medicine on different areas of the body. Yet nonetheless, if we're going to do it, it can be done, but it has to be done correctly. And so this is where a lot of the US regulation is pushing. It's an investment. It's not cheap to put up your own lab. The hood, all of that costs money, and not a lot of physicians are ready to do it. And in Canada, this is where the limitation is. This is where the restriction is that they don't allow for certain biologics processing, and that's why a lot of these Canadians, even from Windsor, I have a number of Canadians that come to me into Michigan, and they come for the day, they do the treatment, and they go back. And so this is the biggest issue, I think, and it's probably not going to go away. The other big difference is in Canada, for example, even in the US, when we process these samples, we historically we would have a machine at the bedside, and we basically take the patient's blood and we inject it into this machine, and it processes the sample and it comes out. And then we take that sample and inject it into the patient. But we're actually manually doing this preparation now, which is not done probably maybe 5% at most of physicians that are doing regenerative medicine are doing this method, which is, I believe, the better method, in yielding higher and better results. Again, that's an issue in setting up a lab in Ontario. You will not. That's all, because it's all hospital based support. So in a hospital versus an outpatient clinic, we set it up in our outpatient clinic. And so this is the biggest differences, I think, between Canada and the US. And that's why we see a lot of Canadians come over to us, because of the way we are able to do the processing, still safe, and more effective than the traditional methods.
Got it. So it's both a regulatory issue and a cost issue, which makes a lot of sense. Now, on
Yeah.
this topic of you doing it manually, what exactly does that entail, and how come it's more effective?
When we do it through the lab manual separation, where we actually have a lab technician that does the separation of the cells from the product that we obtain from the patient, it yields 10 to 20 times more platelets or stem cells. So the yield
Wow.
being higher allows for better outcomes. And it's funny because patients who understand this have read up on it. They come with this common knowledge that, you guys do it in a way that's different than the doctor down the road, because I don't want it to be processed mechanically through a machine. I want it to be processed by human hands. It increases the efficacy of the product and the treatment, and in the end, you get much happier patients. I've been doing this since 2016, specifically regenerative, and I took on this new model 2 years ago, and I can tell you, from 16 to 2 years ago versus 2 years ago to now, I've seen much better outcomes. Patients are much happier, and at least 80% or more of patients are happier with the outcomes because of this method and this technique that we use. And, you know, I can't put it all on me. I mean, I think that if I did it versus a colleague of mine, we'll get the same outcomes. It's the method of preparation.
Sure. And one thing that I've already taken away from this, from
Mhm.
your approach to your clinics and to your work with your patients and everything that you do, that I think any business owner, any entrepreneur, anybody in any industry can also take away, is you're very much looking at the market and studying the market, and then reverse engineering what you need to provide to cater to that market, to really service the market at the best level possible. Even initially speaking, when you mentioned people were coming to you and asking for these regenerative techniques, stem cells and PRP and things of that nature, and you had to pivot your essentially what we would call a product line or a service line to
Mm-hmm.
cater to that. So I love that approach of looking at the market, seeing what the needs and demands are, and then looking at how you can provide that. I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs in the business space make the
Mm-hmm.
mistake of trying to create this incredible product or service in their minds without ever going to market, without ever testing anything, and then being, experiencing that rude awakening and being very much disappointed that the results weren't there and their business is not able to grow or scale. So I just love that from an entrepreneurial perspective, how you always look at the market and then you cater
Mm-hmm.
to the market. And I think this manual technique is also part of that as well. You're really catering
Right.
to what your patients need and want. Now let's talk about diversifying and how that's helped you in your business and how that's helped you grow. And I know nowadays you're almost being the shining example for other people in your field, and they're looking at you and they're coming to you for advice on how they can sustain and grow their practices as well. So I'll let you tell us a bit more about how you've done that and how you think about diversifying.
So and at some point, whenever you feel it's appropriate, we'll touch base on the marketing aspect, because this has been a huge eye opener for me as well. The marketing spend of a clinic, and I'll give you some insight on that. But going
Sure.
back to diversifying, um, so when I started practicing clinical medicine back in 2010, the adage of kind of be the master of one trade, is still present and prevalent. But I realized that by doing so, you're limiting your patient slash clients that are walking through the door. So if I maintained a practice in traditional interventional pain, I would be really busy. Interventional pain is extremely busy regardless, but the patient who walks in the door, there's a good opportunity and possibility that you're going to turn away 50% of them, or maybe 30-40% of them, because you don't offer something that they're looking for. And so when I looked at that, and we created, so I used to be a consultant up until about 2021. So I would consult my services to practices. So and it was a very good business model. I had little to no overhead. I went in there, I did the treatment. It was amazing financially, but there was no brick and mortar for me to fall back on. That, hey, when I turn 55 and I want to take a step back, how can I do that? And so that's why I really pursued my own physical organization. I still do consulting, but we actually have a practice set up with 3 satellite locations right now, and we have providers, etc. And so when I looked at this model and I got into it, I started the office organization with a very, very linear path, where I said, we're going to do interventional pain. And then I started networking with LinkedIn and other different platforms, groups and social networking events. And I realized that there's a lot more out there that we can offer as a clinician. And so when we talk about diversifying, I right now in my practice, we do interventional pain. I treat VA patients, veterans,
Mhm.
where we do veteran evaluations. I do independent medical examinations for insurance companies that allow for a physician input, a secondary input as to patient's condition. We do our own medication management, where we actually offer medications to patients on site, and it's a convenience factor for them. And then I have a very strong program in we call it personal injury or auto workman's comp. And a lot of physicians, so I mean, right there, you're talking about 6 or 7 service lines. And
Mhm.
right there, you're now taking what you would have done, and offering now multitude of services that you can still do and still be able to be successful. And so I realized that because at some point the regulations may change, patient interests may change, the demographics may change, but you should be able to be prepared for it. I've certified myself in interventional pain in probably about 8 or 9 different advanced interventional pain techniques that I can use for a patient. So when they ask me, I have specific requests to say, hey, Dr. Musavi, do you do this procedure? I say, yes, I do. Great. I'm going to send you a referral. Imagine if I hadn't diversified my skill set and my interest, I would have to turn that patient away. And when you turn one patient away, that referral source, then almost like out of sight, out of mind, they're almost going to forget about you, because they're going to say, you can't. So even with the providers I brought on board, yeah, and when I talk to them, and we talk about diversifying, we talk about training, we talk about advancing your skill set, doing different things, as because of this, because I think it'll help grow your practice. And when you have multiple revenue streams, you're not putting your eggs in one basket. And I think that's huge, because regulations change month to month, if not year to year. And so we see this, and I think it better prepares us for it. So diversifying is key. And I had a friend of mine who came over last night, and just specifically to chat about, her concern was, what do I do to diversify myself? I'm a physician. I do a 9 to 5 job, but what happens after 9 to 5? Where's my residual income, or where's my fallback? And so for me personally, if I stopped interventional pain management tomorrow, I have my regenerative medicine, I have my independent medical exams, I have my veteran exams, I have multiple facets that I can still fall back on. Let's just say Medicare, which is a regulating body in the US, says we're going to cut reimbursements by half, and all the other insurance companies will follow suit. We still have something to fall back on, and not really have a major impact on our financial stability. So I think for that reason, diversifying is key. And at the same time, scaling from day one is key. I'm a hard believer of it. There's many physicians that don't believe in it. And they feel like, they have to establish one location, one practice, and then scale after that. You miss the reason why I opened 3 satellites is because there are patients coming to me from different geographic areas in Michigan on multiple occasions. And I said, let me set up a satellite in those locations. And by doing so, my satellites are getting, the days I'm there are getting just as busy as our main location. So again, it's the idea of diversifying and scaling from day one. And I think that, we've been in practice for, our organization has been officially open for about 1.5 years now. And I'm at a point on our productivity perspective where I have physician friends who have been open for 6-7 years, and we're now equal head and head. So, and it took me, 2 years ish to get to that point. But again, it's because I kind of really looked into the business model, which honestly, I only really picked up in the last few years, because we're so narrow minded as physicians.
Yeah, I love that. And clearly, you're
Yeah.
defying the stereotype of being narrow minded as a physician, because you're very much entrepreneurial as well, and looking at how you can grow and scale all of this. I didn't know, by the way, that you did the consulting work beforehand as well, and you're still doing that on the side, I guess, because it's not main priority.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Um, so that's
Absolutely.
interesting to know. And it seems to me like the diversification side of things is just like any investments. You're diversifying to protect your business and to continue to create more alternatives and options for yourself. There was a saying, I think it was Peter Thiel. I'm not exactly sure if it was his quote, but it's a pretty crude saying, which was
Mhm.
something along the lines of specialization is for ants. And he was a big fan of diversifying and essentially having tentacles in different areas, and protecting yourself by having different layers
Mhm.
to your business, and all the rest. Now, of course, there's both sides to that. I know a lot of people who specialize in different areas in the entrepreneurship space as well, and they do it really well, at least to build their initial wealth, and then they diversify from there to maintain and grow their wealth over time. But I think it's really interesting to see you look at all of this through this lens of diversification, and
Sure.
setting up all the different arms of the business as well. Now, you wanted to talk about the marketing side of things. What have you learned in the marketing process as you're scaling all these different clinics?
Oh, so that aspect I think was huge, and I talked to all my colleagues about it. When we started the practice, we were approached by multiple organizations to say, you know, you need this, you need SEO management, you need Google Ads, you need on the ground marketing, and et cetera, et cetera. And so initially we thought, oh my, the spend is so high. Like, how do we do it? Like, how do we afford it? And in retrospect, now that when I talk to colleagues of mine who come to me, and we just have chit chat about, how the practices are grown, I tell them off the bat, have a significant allocation of funds for marketing. I think because of our marketing, our spend that we've done, pretty much we opened doors in more or less June of 2022. We started our full marketing program in August and pardon me, July, where we took on a firm to handle all of our SEO management and different various platforms. And then in September, we took on an on the ground marketing firm to do our door to door marketing. It has changed. I mean, we get 20 referrals a week, at and in our world that's a pretty decent number. Sometimes more than that. So
Hmm.
the big thing is we're always so, we have the adage in our mind that, if you build it, they'll come. Meaning if you open doors, patients are going to flood the gates. It doesn't happen. You need that spend to get to that point. And I think because we allocated that amount, and it's a significant amount monthly, um, we were able to get to the point where we're at quicker than a lot of my colleagues who have been open for many more years, because of the fact that we realize that, if you don't market yourself, if you don't do these kind of interactions and discussions, and similar to what you and I are doing today, it makes it very very challenging to grow. I was approached probably about 6 months ago by a producer from CBS, and in the United States, in Michigan, and he selected 3 clinics in each specialty, and we were one of the clinics because he liked our Google reviews, he liked our website, and so they did a little bit of background check before they called these pain clinics. So I got a call, and it was around 4 o'clock in the evening, and one of my staff came to me and said, "This is a person from this TV network, and a producer from there, and so on and so forth." So I said, "Okay, it's probably some type of some type of soliciting." So I said, "Okay, but you know what? Let me entertain it." And I called him back. And within 30 seconds of the conversation, this is what he told me. He's like, "Listen, Dr. Musavi, what I'm going to offer you, you have to spend money on, you have to dedicate time on, and it's not going to be cheap. Before we move on and I spend time speaking to you, are you a physician that's open to this?" That's literally how we started the conversation. Really nice guy. I said, "Absolutely." Because by then I was 7, 8 months into it. So I understood marketing was really important. Spending on it was really important. And he started the conversation that this is my role. We have a show on CBS. It airs, before and after football, this and that. And he was going into detail about all this. And I said, "Sign me up." So I was the first pain clinic out of the 3 that he called, that his assistant called, and I called him back. And right away, he's like, "If you're in, if the other 2 call me back, I'm not gonna take the answer." But the point I'm making is that understanding. His perspective is, we're so narrow-minded that we don't want to spend money on anything other than our billers, our staff, and maybe a little bit of brochures here and there. That he felt me out to say that, are you in it for the long run, or are you just going to say, "This is too much money, please go ahead and move on to the next doctor"? And so
Right.
this is the mentality, I think, that even outsiders are seeing us, and I think we have to change that. And I believe that because of this mentality shift, we're seeing a lot more growth opportunity, especially with newer physicians that are coming in the market. Yes, you have to have money aside to do this. It's like I said, it's not cheap. It can go 10K or higher per month just to do your marketing. Forget even anything else. But at the end of the day, the return on that investment can double or triple. And so this is the key when it comes to marketing. So I tell, because when I tell my marketing spend to a lot of my colleagues, they're like in shock. They're like, "Why would you spend so much on marketing?" I said, "Well, look where I am now after a year and a half, and look where you are in 7 years, 8 years, 10 years, right? We're almost
Hmm.
equal now, right?"
Hmm.
So
Absolutely. It's definitely the way to speed up that process, which is why your results are there in such a shorter time span. I love that the producer from CBS asked you some direct qualifying questions. He was obviously a great sales guy, because that's what
yeah,
we
yeah.
call qualifying
Well,
questions, to get those answers.
I should correct myself. He wasn't directly from CBS. He was a producer for a show that they had an airtime on CBS. That I
Got
should
it.
correct myself. But nonetheless, I mean, we aired twice, once in October, once in November, and it's pretty cool. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll put in the show notes. Everybody can watch that as well. And I just said it sounds like it was worth the investment as well. So I'm glad you
Yeah, I think it
made that
was.
decision.
I think it was. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, on the marketing side, I have a good friend as well who runs a lot of ads and does a lot in the health supplement side of things. And he always says if you can't spend minimum 50,000 a month on your marketing, your ad spend, don't even start. So he has a belief that you have to start at that level. So there definitely
I'll
is
get there hopefully soon, but yeah, no, I
yeah.
agree with it. I agree with it. There's no limit.
Yeah, and marketing and sales are what make the business. That's what makes a business a business. Otherwise, you have a hobby, you don't have a business, right? So, I think
Exactly.
whenever you invest into marketing and sales and getting your message, your services in front of people and gathering eyeballs, which is the ultimate currency nowadays, it's definitely worth it, and that's how you grow and
Exactly.
scale. So, it's amazing to see.
Exactly.
I wanted to go back to your actual work in your field of study and what you do, and ask you a
Okay.
question that I'm curious about. With all of your
Mhm.
experience nowadays and all the patients that you see in the direction of pain management and stem
Mhm.
cells and regenerative medicine and everything else, would you recommend any type of preventative measures to everybody listening? I mean, if we're looking to avoid general health issues, pain related
Mhm.
issues and whatnot. I have a couple injuries myself. I actually just
Sure.
unfortunately re-injured my knee last week again. So I'm
Mhm.
handling that now. But do you have any specific advice for anybody who'd be interested in preventative measures?
Great question. So I have a number of colleagues, friends, associates out here in Windsor. I mean, I have many in the US too, that have approached me about this and say, I play soccer every day, or I do circuit training, or I weight lift, or I do a lot of exercises, et cetera, running, jogging, all the above. I have a little discomfort here and there. I'll scan them. I'll bring them to my practice. We'll do an evaluation. I'll do an MRI, or whatever the appropriate scan is for that person, and we'll reveal some type of pathology. So I tell them, listen, it's one of two things that you can do. When you talk about preventative, the true preventative method is just not do it anymore. But how realistic is that, right? I mean, I have a
Right.
50-year-old colleague, 55, I think he is, and he plays soccer avidly, and he's got bilateral knee, both sides knee pain, and I did the MRIs and it shows meniscus tears. He could live with those tears, but eventually when he's 60 or maybe even sooner, those tears are going to progress and get worse. So how do you prevent that from happening? This is where the whole regenerative medicine comes in, and this is where we're advocating it. So I see young patients in their 40s with horrible spines. I do their MRI because they have a little bit of back pain, but I explain to them, you're at 42, maybe by the age of 45 or 50, that little bit's going to be moderate and maybe even severe. So then at that point, what do? Even the regenerative treatments may not help you at that point. So from a preventative model, this is what I'm advocating to patients and clients that we see is, you have pain, let's assess and eval. If we can catch and repair and restore that part of your body before it gets worse, so you need surgical intervention, this is the time to do it. Don't come to me when your pain is 10 out of 10. And at that point, I'm going to tell you that if I do regenerative, it may or may not help, and
Mhm.
so the preventative aspect, yes, the lifestyle modifications, weight management, diet, these are all important. Vitamin supplements, etc., stretching before exercising, etc., etc. But from a structural point of view or mechanical point of view, I find that advocating the regenerative aspect is huge. And I've been seeing, in the next month, I have patients coming to me from Windsor and Canada and Michigan who are in mild pain, but we revealed pathology on their imaging and they don't want it to get severe or even moderately severe. So they're coming in for their regenerative treatments. I have patients who get their regenerative treatments done 3 or 4 years ago before, and then time goes on, degeneration still continues. You're still active. You're still maintaining some high level, activity, and you may get repeat or recurrent pain in 3 years. They come in for another treatment rather than let me sit on it. I spent money on it 3 years ago, but versus they see it as an investment in their health. You know,
Mhm.
because even post-surgical recovery can be much more significant. So from a preventative point of view, lifestyle management, absolutely. But for those who actually come in, but majority of us have some type of ache and pain. when they come in and we reveal that, I tell them nip it in the bud before it gets worse. And this is what we're advocating now. And a lot of patients are seeing that. They're seeing it, they're doing it, and it's an amazing thing, because when I treat them as a preventative measure before it gets worse, we see much better outcomes. And and I tell patients, I'll say that I'll treat you, today. I'll consult you in a couple of weeks, see how you do. I'll consult you again in about 2 months, and after that, I don't want to see you. You don't have to come
Sure.
back to me, hopefully for years and years. And so that the
Mhm.
idea is very uplifting for them. And so, but it's hard. It's a hard sell when you talk about a 40-year-old and you talk about, oh my God,
Mhm.
I need a treatment. Well, yeah, because when you're 50, you're going to need surgery. And so we try and prevent that. So it's education as well as awareness that is key for that
Yeah, and I
prevention.
agree. I think the education piece is really important because I was just about to say it's becoming less and less of a hard sell because I'm telling you from my
Yeah.
own perspective, I'm very young and I'm definitely not 40 yet. And I'm very much considering some of these regenerative practices, and I want to almost get ahead of the game and almost even as a health benefit because I'm always looking at as much as the word doesn't do it justice, but I'll say it anyways, biohacking and looking to really
Hmm.
be optimal, whether it's from a cognitive perspective, whether it's from a physical performance perspective, because I do play sports and martial arts
Hmm.
and things like that as
Hmm.
well. So I'm looking to optimize
Yeah,
myself, and also
absolutely.
for business,
Absolutely.
for conversations like this, to be operating at your best. So for somebody like myself, and I think that's a lot of people nowadays with the explosion of podcasts and information and health educators like yourself now, I think it's becoming more and more prevalent where we're actually looking to get ahead of this. And, I may have a couple aching injuries and minor injuries. It's nothing serious, but I already want to get ahead of the game and start doing some stem cells and start doing some PRP and whatever else it may be. So I'll definitely talk to you more about that offline. But the
For
reason I'm
sure.
asking this and saying all this as well is my next question was, is there an age limit? I'm not aware of this. Is there a time frame where you would recommend somebody start to take on these practices?
I've treated 13-year-old soccer player with a gastroc tear to
Wow.
a 74-year-old hip. Recently, you talk about martial arts. I recently treated a jiu-jitsu fighter. He had a lateral collateral ligament tear of his knee fighting. He was in a
Mhm.
tournament and he injured it. And surgically, he was told he needs surgery. He educated himself. He found us. He called me. He did bone marrow. He was almost 90% better with that injury 3 months, or pardon me, 3 months into the treatment. So prior to that, he was already sparring again, etc. He injured his right knee, and based on his experience, he came back to me 6 months later for his right knee. Fortunately, his right knee was just a strain, so we didn't have to treat it. But the
Mhm.
idea of catching it, and he was 33, I think 34. So they can be young, they can and very old. So there really isn't a time frame. It's a matter of identifying if you're a good candidate, and if you are, then absolutely, it's your own body's ability to heal. So no, it doesn't matter if you're 10 years old, not that I've treated one, but if versus 75-year-old, if your body has the capacity to continue to heal, we can take that and redirect it in the area that's damaged or injured. And that's the whole kind of understanding of how this whole regenerative process works.
Got it. So again, follow up on this question because I'm just personally very curious. If somebody
Hmm.
does come to you and let's say they lean on the younger side and there aren't very clear issues that need to be addressed immediately, but they're telling you essentially they want to get ahead of the game and they want to
Hmm.
optimize their performance and maybe get rid of some small injuries and whatnot. Would there ever be a case where you would turn down a patient, or is there essentially no harm in doing these practices at any time?
Great question. I've definitely turned down patients, especially the younger ones. I had a basketball player, high school basketball player, who was already drafted, was going college. He got a scholarship and everything, and he had recurrent ankle pain. We did an MRI. There's no pathology. There's a little bit of tendonitis, and so my options for him was, listen, let me treat you with some therapy, a little bit of steroid therapy, anti-inflammatory, and if it fit, because they came in with PRP in mind. They're like, we want to do this. This is what we read up on it. This athlete did it. That athlete did it, and I redirected them. And actually, it worked for him, where we didn't have to do the PRP. We did the traditional treatments and he got better. So the point is every now let's just say the dad and the son together. He was 18, but nonetheless the dad was involved, or I think he was 17. But if they really push for me and said, Dr. Musavi, we understand that it may not work, et cetera, and they're paying out of pocket for it, right? The beauty of PRP is no harm, no foul. It's your own body's biologic. We're processing it. We're re-injecting it. We're not putting anything foreign. There's no chance of reactivities and no chance of allergic reaction. There's no chance of really major complications. Any interventional technique we do, we always penetrate the skin. So obviously there's always a risk of bleeding, allergic reaction, and infection with the stuff we use to clean the area and etc. So that's common, whether I do regenerative or traditional pain treatments. But that's the nice thing is as I kind of go back to that patient who wanted his lumbar spine treated, after 3 visits, we went right back to it because he understood what he wanted. Is there any harm for me to do it? Absolutely not. It's probably safer in some ways to do this rather than injecting corticosteroid, for example, into someone. And so we're pulling away from that whole mentality. And when I engage with the patient, I tell them very, very much off the bat that, listen, there's no harm, no foul to this. Our techniques are safe. How we do it's all image guided. We use X-ray, we use ultrasound to place the sample into the area that we're treating. But at the end of the day, it really won't do you any harm. And so with that mentality in mind, a lot of them are like, you know what, I want to try it. I'd rather not do surgery. I want to try it, etc. So yeah, that's a nice thing. But I do turn patients away because that's on my own principle. Because
Mhm.
if I feel like they're too far gone, I won't. I'll tell them, don't spend your money on this. I don't think it's going to help. If they're too young, or if the symptom is not clinical, like the jiu-jitsu fighter who came in for his right knee, and he was like, "I want to do it, doc. I'm ready." And I told him no. I said no. I think we should do traditional, and I'm happy I did because he did decent after, just from therapy, a little bit of stretching, recovery time. So every patient we treat individually, regardless of age. But education and following the principle of doing what's best for the patient is I think key.
Yeah, that's understandable, and it makes a lot of sense. You're following your own moral code essentially to make sure you're practicing in an ethical way and guiding them in the best direction for them. But again, this is all very curious for me because I'm very
Yeah.
much personally interested. But again, I haven't had any type of surgeries before for
Hmm.
injuries, thankfully.
Hmm.
So I haven't gotten to that extreme, at least not yet. But I'm very much active, and there are very much nagging little injuries that I do want to get in front of and handle. So I wanted to clarify all of that. And for anybody who's listening, who's in the same shoes as I am, especially like you said, a lot of jiu-jitsu fighters, MMA fighters, nowadays I have a lot of them in my own network and friend group. And we've had a
Hmm.
couple of fighters, including a UFC fighter, on this podcast as well. And I know
Hmm.
they deal with a lot of this, and I know they're constantly looking for regenerative or pain treatments, and there are a couple of clinic
Oh
actually
yeah.
in this area as well that a bunch of the fighters go to. So I know it's very much top of mind always. Now, as we look into the future, I'm curious as to what your thoughts on this are. There are a lot of technologies, including, of course, artificial intelligence and AGI
Hmm.
developing and everything else coming
Hmm.
into all these different industries. And we're seeing it in the online space, in the business realm, and disrupting a lot of different industries. A lot of ways helping, but also in a lot of ways disrupting, and not necessarily in a negative sense of the word, but just changing
Hmm.
the trajectory or the path that these industries are taking. Has this technology or AI or everything that has been happening affected your industry at all? And also, where do you see it going, and how do you see yourself incorporating all of this?
Good question. And so I can tell you right now, I have a very strong interest in this aspect of the industry. I think that we can improve efficiency. I think we can minimize medical errors. I think we can help practices with overhead costs with this type of advancement in how we organize ourselves. AI. I'm actually talking to a few organizations right now who do have some strong interest in it as well, and and so I definitely believe that it's going to be a game changer. I think that there is a place. There's a lot of recurrent um, thinking, recurrent treatment protocols, etc., that I think we can implement utilizing some of these technologies, and not necessarily have to be redundant. Rather than that, we can be efficient. And so I believe AI is going to be huge. I know there's going to be a lot of work being done right now. I know I have a strong interest in it, and I'm probably pursuing that aspect of it another aspect of diversifying myself, but I think that there is definitely a big element to this, and specifically within clinics. Hospital networks obviously is going to be a bigger modification that's going to be needed, but I think private clinics can really implement it, and I think it'll hugely impact efficiency and overhead costs. So I see it being a positive, for documentation purposes, for efficiency purposes, and again, to minimize some of these, and to be honest, to minimize physician burnout. I think that all the things we have to do, from the notes, from the constant documentation, I think it pushes us, at the end of the day. The same colleague of mine was saying that, she sees 30 patients during the day, but she doesn't have time to do the notes. And then she sits at home or the next day to do 30 notes. It's like, and it's not easy, believe me, to do these notes when you're at home,
Yeah,
because
that's
your
near
mind is,
impossible. Sorry to cut
yeah,
you off. I was just gonna say I do a lot of meetings throughout the day, and I've tried this before, where I may miss out on
yeah,
notes and whatnot, and then at the end of the day, think back to those
you can.
conversations and try to recoup everything. But
So
unfortunately, our brains are just not that good. Our memories are not that good.
no. And I think this is where AI is going to come in to really help that process, where you still spend the same amount of time with the patient, but rather than having to document and type, or having a staff member in the room doing the same thing, you can actually engage with the patient, talk to them, find out more about their concerns, and let the computer technology do all the documentation for you. So I think it's huge. I have a very strong interest in it, and maybe that might be another podcast on a separate day.
For
Or maybe
sure,
who knows
yeah.
where it's going to go. But yeah,
We're gonna have to revisit this, and you might be speaking to an AGI instead of me on that podcast. We'll see. We'll see where it all develops. But the reason
sure.
I ask is because you have that strong interest and mindset around diversifying yourself and essentially bulletproofing your business model. And you've done a great job of that so far. And earlier in the conversation, you
Thanks.
mentioned Dr. Google, and now
Yeah,
Dr. AI is definitely going to be
exactly.
a big player
Absolutely.
in this space, just like in any other space.
Mhm.
So, generally
Mhm.
speaking, are you more excited or more nervous about the development of AI and everything and where it's all headed?
Personally, I'm more excited because I think that, as with any look, we had to combat Dr. Google, right? Patients came to me with this is what I read, and then you spend the time explaining that, no, this is your misconception, or you're right, and let's incorporate that into your treatment plan. So I think it can go both ways. I think with AI it's the same thing. I think it can go both ways, but we have to understand what the technology is. Like, for me not to be able to Google, stuff and find out what the patients are seeing, I wouldn't be able to address it. But so I educated myself on that. And I think it's the same way as AI. If we educate ourselves, I think we can combat any possible negative repercussions that may come out of it. But I think it's definitely important, because I know it's going to improve efficiency. I mean, my staff is, I don't want them to burn out either. And so this, for me, it's important that, we create other ways and means to help develop these strategies to improve efficiency, yet not have to cut back on our patient time and or our volumes.
Well, I love your optimistic take on everything, which is it's great. I think an optimistic point of view is the way to really
Yeah,
grow and develop anything in life, because your outlook determines your outcome. So when you're more optimistic, you're just more willing to look at opportunities as opposed to look at the challenges or
absolutely.
obstacles that may arise as a result. So I'm glad to hear that. And I want to wrap this up with a final question that I ask
Sure.
everybody. With all of your expertise in different areas and with your mindset and how you really calculate everything in terms of these different aspects of the business, I'm curious to hear your answer. It's a very open-ended question, so you can
Hmm.
feel free to take it wherever you like it, but I'm genuinely curious to hear just your thought process. And
Okay.
this question came from when I was younger and going to a lot of business conferences and meeting a lot of people that I looked up to at the time. And I
Hmm.
would ask them all the exact same question. And depending on what age I was just substitute the number, and I would take their advice and essentially apply it. And I took the good, left the bad, as Bruce Lee says, and
Right.
tried to see the results in my life. So the question
Mhm.
is, knowing everything you know today and the person that you are today, if you could go back to your younger self, and I know that you
Mhm.
have kids, so a helpful way of looking at this may be thinking about talking to your kids. If you could go back
Mhm.
to your younger self and give yourself only one piece of advice, what would that be?
So it's there's probably many things on my mind, but I think at the end of the day, plan your life where you can enjoy it. Business, work are always going to be there, but plan your life where where you foresee a nice, steady balance. And I think that's where my focus is right now. I'm planning my current organization. So in the next 3 to 4 years, I have a great balance with my personal life and my business life. And I think that's key. I think that's key because, all of us can be workaholics. And I think, it's an excuse, but I think that, my awareness more recently has been that if I go back 10 years, even from 2010, I would have started my own practice because I have my own autonomy, my own control, and yes, it would have been a financial strain, but you know what? I would be sitting here a decade later, probably with, multiple practices with multiple providers, and I could be going on a 1 month vacation with my family. Right. So plan your life. I think that where you can have a balance. And so that's what I would have done differently. And I'm doing it now, but that's what I would educate my kids on is, you know, have a balance. 9 to 5, when you come home, do your best not to do any work and just enjoy life.
That's great advice. I love that. And I think that's a beautiful place to wrap up. Sayed, thank you so much
Yeah,
for being here
for sure.
today. I learned a lot in this
Thank you.
conversation, both on a
Yeah.
medical perspective and from your areas of expertise, and also from the business side of things with really prioritizing marketing, prioritizing scale, and rapidly scaling in all directions, bulletproofing your business model, and really taking care of all of your priorities so that later you could live a happier, more balanced life and essentially take yourself out of the business and have just as much impact, but also enjoy the fruits of your labor. So I've learned a lot.
Absolutely.
I'm sure everybody else has as well. Thank you so much again for your time today.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Boo. I appreciate your time. Thank you.